Hey guys, welcome to Toby Talks Tech. I'm Toby and today we're going to talk some tech. In the last part we hit an epic milestone and we built and started up our very first Node.js web server. Now before we jump into the deep end of the code and really start fleshing out our web application, in this tutorial I want to help you finish off setting up the development environment and making it aware of any local file changes so it automatically restarts your web server. And we're going to set up our local DNS to add a pretty URL to our web server. This is once again going to be an easy tutorial, and if what I just said just sounded like gibberish, probably means you have not watched the previous tutorials in this series, and I highly recommend that you do that before continuing on with this one. But now, before I talk your ears off, let's jump right into the tutorial. Now this is exactly where we left off in the last part of this tutorial series. We have a simple Node.js web server running on our local machine on localhost port 8080, and it simply displays hello node server. Now while that in itself is already terribly exciting, let's display something a little bit more interesting, and then we will also have to deal with automatically watching for changes and restarting the server so that we can update our web page easily and develop it a bit more easily. And then let's also add a more pretty URL, localhost. Yeah, again, it's really interesting. It sounds very techy and nerdy, but let's pretty this up and add a nice URL on top. So for now, let's return to conemu and kill off this process with Ctrl+C. There you go. I just took a little bit to shut down. So now our server has stopped. Let's return to Visual Studio Code. What I'm going to do, because this is no longer just a standalone once-off application, this is a server, so I'm actually going to rename this file. You can hit F2 to rename it. I'm going to call this server.js because it is a server and I like to name things for what they are. Then in your package.json, make sure that under scripts for start, you change this over to be node server.js because that's the one we actually want to now execute when we run. And your main is actually your server.js. And let's return to server.js, and this response, this hello node server is really ugly. It's really not a nice thing. So let's actually send some HTML back. Unfortunately, by default, you can't do a multi-line string in straight JavaScript. However, in the newer versions of Node, which hopefully you are running if you just installed Node from the official website, instead of using single quotes, you can use the backticks. So I can actually start and finish JavaScript strings with backticks, and they can be multi-line. That's fine. And I can actually use string interpolation. And the way this works, for example, down here, we're going this string, concatenate port, concatenate ... If I change this to be the backticks, I can actually go server running at port. I can get rid of these ugly plus things. I can go $, open curly brackets, port, close curly brackets, and then get rid of the plus, the single quote, ... and change the last one to a backtick as well. And this will actually convert this into a string, and it will substitute this variable automatically within the string with the right port. And this is just a much neater way of writing it, but also string interpolation. This style of writing strings in JavaScript allows us to have multi-line strings, which is much nicer, because now in here, I don't know if you remember your HTML. If you don't and you have no idea what you're doing, you can look up tons of tutorials online. If you want me to create an HTML tutorial just because it's fun, do leave me a comment down below. I can do that as well. So let's just create a really simple HTML response with a little title and a body and a heading and just a little bit more fanciness all around. Let's save this off. Let's go back to conemu and fire that back up. So let's hit npm start. That should now run our server.js file, and here you go, node server.js. Server's running at port 8080. And here, let's refresh our page. And there you go, hello from your local computer. Now there's two more things I want to quickly fix up. For one, you did notice that we had to shut down our server and restart it after we made the change, and that's kind of annoying. We kind of want Node to just automatically detect that we're making changes to our text. So for example, if we wanted to change the HTML, we'd have to obviously modify this response, shut down the server, start it back up. Kind of tedious. We'd like Node to detect that automatically. And fortunately, there is an npm package for that. So let's go back to our console and kill off our server. And let's install another npm package called Node Monitor or nodemon, which really monitors your code and it automatically restarts the server in the background. So we don't have to do this shutting down and starting back up nonsense. For that, again, let's go npm install, and the package is called nodemon, so node monitor space -- save -def. So because the node monitor isn't actually used to run your server, if you were to deploy this out into AWS, nobody cares that that restarts automatically if someone makes changes, but it's a development tool. Only locally, while you're working on it and while you're making changes, you want it to automatically start. So we are going to save it to the package JSON, but we are going to save it as a development dependency. Let's hit enter. This is going to install node monitor. And now in our package JSON file, you have dependencies is still Express 4.14.0. And in your dev dependencies, you have nodemon. And this will only be installed if you're running it locally. If you install this on a production server, it wouldn't install these dependencies because they're not used and they just load up your code. Again, let's get rid of the hat. So we make sure that this will always be the version that we're using right now. And the other thing we need to change under scripts, under start, right now we're just starting with node. So we now need to change this command to be nodemon. So we're installing this, or we're running this with node monitor, which will then launch the server and automatically watch for changes. Let's save the package JSON file. Let's return to our console, go npm start. This will now run node monitor and says it's watching all of the files and it's still running our server at port 8080. So if you come back and refresh our page, nothing has happened. But now the cool thing is, if I go into the project, open the server.js file and make some changes in this code, and if I now hit Ctrl S and return to conemu, you will see that nodemon actually noticed this change due to change, and it's restarting your node application automatically. So now, if I refresh, there you go. Your change comes through automatically. All you have to do is make your changes and save your stuff in Visual Studio Code. Nodemon will pick up the change, restart your application server, and all of the changes are coming through nice and easy. Finally, the very last thing I want to show you when setting up your local development server is that right now we're connecting to Localhost. It may not mean much to you, but this is kind of just not pretty. It would be nice if we could, type something like Toby talks tech.dev or something just a bit more fancy. And we can actually do that. It's quite easy on Windows. Well, once you know how to do it, it's easy. There's a file on Windows that you can modify that contains your local DNS entry. And remember, DNS is essentially used to look up the IP address. And if we type google.com, it'll look up Google's IP address. However, we can have our own entries that essentially our own little address book, our own little book of addresses that we look up before we go out to the internet. And in order to do that, you need to have admin access to your computer. If you're on a Mac or Linux, obviously, this will work quite differently. However, let's say you're on Windows machine. What you need to do is you need to fire up Notepad, but you need to open Notepad in administrator mode. In order to do that, let's locate Notepad. And instead of just clicking on it, I'm going to right-click it and select Run as Administrator. Now with Notepad running in administrator mode, let's come into File, Open, and let's navigate to our C drive, into Windows. Under Windows, locate your System32 folder. Inside here, we're going to look for drivers. And yes, I know the host file is hidden for a reason, because if bad guys get their hand on it, they can do some real damage and really hijack your PC. So in here, go etc. And there's nothing in there, but it's only because we're only showing text documents at the moment. So change this to all files. And in here, you will find a hosts file. So let's open this up. And the host file, again, as I said, is essentially your DNS entry, and it's your local DNS. So this will get looked up first before your computer goes out to the internet and tries to find out what google.com points to. So in here, I already have two things defined to point to my local host. So here, create a new line and type 127.0.0.1. And this is essentially the IP address for your local machine. This is the same as saying localhost, but obviously computers work with IP addresses, so we need to specify this IP address is actually the same as writing for humans tobytalkstech.dev. So now when we go to visit tobytalkstech.dev, your computer will look in this file first. It'll find out, ooh, this name is this particular IP address, and so it'll locate your local machine and it'll simply redirect your traffic to your local host. Let's save the host file and let's return to Chrome. In our address bar, we can now get rid of everything and simply type tobytalkstech.dev. But again, we still need to specify the ports. You still have to go :8080. But now obviously this does no longer say localhost because your local computer is going to translate this to your local machine. So it's going to go tobytalkstech.dev, port 8080, hit enter. And there you go. It still points us to the same website, except that we now have a pretty URL. So if we come back to how the internet works, your computer is now accessing tobytalkstech.dev. It'll do a DNS entry lookup on your local machine, which will point it to 127.0.0.1. That will not go out to the internet. It'll simply go back to your own computer. It'll retrieve the data and it'll then display it in your browser. And with that, we're done setting up everything we need on our machine and configuring our development environment. And in the next tutorial, we're really going to jump into building out application and adding a templating engine and all of the cool stuff on top of it. So I hope you're pumped for that. And that is all there is to it. We're now all set up and ready to go. Start building out our web application and building something really awesome that we can deploy into the AWS cloud. If you enjoyed this video, please show your support by liking, favoriting and sharing it. Don't forget to subscribe if you do want to see some more nerdy content, and if you do have any comments, questions or suggestions, just leave them down in the section below. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I will see you later.